This is how to abuse AI to blow up your business so fast in 2026, it feels like you're cheating. Now, look, I've scaled multiple companies to multiple eight figures in a variety of different industries. And along the way, we've hired literally hundreds of people. But because of what's happening with the AI right now, we're literally firing people at a faster rate and we're hiring new ones. So if you want to scale your business with AI, you have to understand one fundamental question. We have access to AI that is literally the IQ of a super genius. Like GPT 5.2 tested at 147 IQ. And Einstein's is only 3 points higher than that. And the length of tasks that AI can do is doubling every 7 months. Yet why is it that every business's revenue isn't just skyrocketing as a result? In fact, why is it your revenue skyrocketing as a result? Well, the answer to that question starts with forgetting about AI entirely. If I gave you 1,000 human employees that will work for you for free, would you even know how to deploy them in a meaningful way for your business? Well, businesses that have already cracked the code on how to profitably deploy human labor will be the ones who accumulate the most value now that labor can be replaced with AI. What most people don't understand is this: labor does not equal value. And all AI is a form of labor. Labor on its own is missing a key ingredient. You see, labor on its own is just potential value. The same way if you were to hold a ball in the air, it's not energy, it's potential energy. Only when that ball is released does it become kinetic energy, does it become actual realized energy. And labor is the same way. Labor only becomes valuable when you have a workflow to deploy it against, okay? A workflow to deploy it against. The same way, if you have a construction crew, imagine you had 1,000 guys sitting there who are all highly talented. They're not gonna build a skyscraper on their own. Even if you say, hey guys, can you guys build us a skyscraper? Not gonna happen, right? Only when they have a blueprint does that labor become valuable. Only when you take that labor plus a blueprint where everyone's assigned individual tasks to do individual things does that create the value of a skyscraper. The same way, businesses like Amazon have 100,000 employees that they paid for themselves because they have places to deploy that labor that makes them more money than it costs them, right? The value of Amazon isn't that they just have all these people, it's that they have places to put these people. Like if Amazon all of a sudden said, hey, you can have all of our employees, go for it. Are you gonna do as much revenue as Amazon? Why not? Like, what is the difference? Because they have a place to deploy the labor that is more valuable than the labor costs. So the first half of this video is where to deploy AI in your business, where it actually adds value, where that labor becomes valuable. And the second half is about what tools you use and how to use them to actually blow up your business. So the first thing we need to understand, this is the most important thing, is triage. Where is the most valuable places we can use AI in the business? And the first thing you have to think about is if you were in an ER, they have the concept of triage for a very important reason. People will literally die if they do not operate this way. And that means they're serving people, they're helping people in the order of priority, not based off who came in the door first, but what is the most highest priority thing that they can be doing. So someone comes in and they're having a heart attack, even if they just came in, there's been a guy waiting for 4 hours who has a sprained ankle, who are they gonna help first? The guy with the heart attack, because it has the most meaning to do right now. And most business owners, what they're doing is they're treating AI like they're the surgeon in the ER who's going and helping the lowest priority things. This is the first person who came in the door. It was the most obvious thing. Like most of the stuff you're probably using AI for is the most obvious answers. And that's why your business isn't scaling. You're not effectively deploying labor. Maybe you're saving a few hours here, a few hours there, but you don't understand how to triage in a way where the things you do with AI, even if it's a little bit more difficult to accomplish, dramatically affect the outcome of the business, where you could go from, instead of just saving a couple hours, doubling, tripling, quadrupling the business, right? Or maybe improving your gross margins by 50%, 100% as a result of focusing on not the easiest thing, but the highest triage things in the business. So that is what we have to understand. What is triage to use AI for? And this is the equation. And it's really important to understand what each of these two variables mean. But it's value times difficulty is going to be equal to triage of what we use AI for. Now we have to understand what is valuable and what can it actually do. And there's only 3 things that AI can do that is valuable in the business. The first one, and these are in order of importance, is removing constraints in the business, right? So you have to say what stops your business from scaling right now. So before figuring out, let's just build this things yet. No. What is actually stopping you from scaling the business right now? And there's only ever 2 answers to this question, 2 high-level answers. And that is just supply constrained, all right? Meaning, even if you got more customers, you can't fulfill on them. Or you're demand constrained, meaning You can't get more customers. You need to get more customers. And so if you're supply constrained, meaning you can get more customers, but you just can't fulfill on them, then the first thing we're going to say is what pieces of fulfillment are constrained by labor, right? So which pieces are the actual bottleneck stopping us from scaling? And what I want you to do is basically break down all the pieces of your fulfillment and say, hey, for each of these pieces, this one's scalable, this one's scalable, this one's scalable, this one's not scalable. We got to do this crazy service and it's very difficult to do this piece. This one's scalable, this one's not scalable. And usually there's only a couple of pieces of your fulfillment that are not scalable. And those pieces, those are the problems that we're going to attack. Those are the highest value things in the business you can solve. Because if you solve those things, even putting AI aside, if you solve those things, the business can scale because you're no longer supply constrained. You can double revenue. It's not an issue on that front. And there is no fulfillment issues. So those become the highest value things we want to explore, saying, hey, can we solve this with AI? Which we'll get to in a second, I promise. But we need to understand the first principles first, or it is a waste of time and we're just walking around like a man with a hammer saying, how can we do AI in the business? We need to understand where the value is. And that is where the most value is if you are supply constrained. Now, if you're demand constrained, meaning I can scale fulfillment, I can take on more customers, I just can't get more customers. Then we have to ask this question: where is the traffic currently coming from, and why are we constrained? Right? So is it organic traffic, or is it paid traffic? So if it's organic traffic, are you making content? Maybe the constraint for you is not producing enough of it. If it's paid traffic, maybe the constraint is you don't have enough sales reps to take more calls. Right? So we have to say, where is the part that is constrained by labor when it comes to the demand side? And so that could be physical or cognitive labor, right? So it might literally just be, you need to make more content and you just can't come up with the ideas, or you can't edit enough stuff, or you can't whatever. The same thing with ads. Maybe you can't produce enough good, high quality creatives to be able to scale your ads. Or again, maybe you don't have enough sales reps to where even if you scaled your ads, you can't take those sales calls. You have to say, where is the demand actually constrained by, right? And some people, the answers you're watching are like, hey, my demand's not actually constrained. I can just spend more on ads. I never thought about it. I can't tell you how many business owners I talk to where they're like at 5x ROAS, and what stops you from doubling the business? It's like, oh, I'm working on fixing stuff. And they dude, why don't you just go in the ad account and double ads there? So really understanding, where are you demand constrained? So an example on one offer is we had a ROAS in about 5 to 7x, and we were constrained by the fact that we didn't have enough people to take sales calls. So what did we do? Again, using the analogy of human labor, because that's what we're replacing, we hired 100 plus sales reps. And all of a sudden, we scaled to $5 million a month because the only constraint was sales reps to take the calls. ROAS was good, spend more money on ads. Now we need someone to take sales calls. We got sales reps to take those sales calls. And fulfillment, we had no demand, we had no supply constraint on that front. So all we needed to do was increase the amount of human labor we had for that one constraint, right? High quality human labor. So that's what you're thinking through. So where are we actually constrained from a labor standpoint? And before we even ask, can AI do this, we need to understand where those constraints are. So the second thing that AI can do that's valuable is reducing costs. Right now, this isn't nearly as valuable as removing constraints because costs can only minimize down to zero. But if we remove constraints, there's no limit, there's no ceiling on how far we can scale. So that's why the first thing you need to do is look at the constraints and find the constraints in the business. Right? Identify what they are. You can't solve a problem that's in front of you. Imagine you're a mathematician. You're like, hey, solve this math problem. And you're looking at a whiteboard, and there is nothing on the whiteboard. Like, what problem are you solving? There is no problem to solve. But even if you write out a very complex problem and you put it in front of them, even though it's complex, now it's possible to solve because it's actually there in front of them. And that is why constraints are the first thing we need to figure out. What are the constraints of the business before we even address how do we solve these with AI? And then the second is reducing costs, right? After we've removed all the constraints, we've done everything we can to replace labor on the removing of the constraints. Then we move down to how do we eliminate costs, right? How do we get our margins to be better? And there's only two types of costs. The first type is the obvious one. It is human labor, right? So what we do is we audit the highest paid people one by one, and we see where is their time going. And most people think about replacing labor like, all right, I'm going to replace Johnny, but that is the wrong way to think about it. The way you want to think about replacing labor is, all right, Johnny's the highest paid person on the team. What are all the things Johnny does? And everything an employee do is essentially lots of different workflows, right? Like the marketing guy doesn't do marketing. He has this workflow for ideating stuff, this workflow for creating the content, this workflow for posting stuff, this workflow for whatever else he does. Like everything is broken up into a set of workflows. And all an employee is doing is you're allocating that labor to a set of workflows. That is it. So you need to understand where the highest paid people's time is going to, what workflows, right? And understanding that where those workflows are is where the highest value is to replace them. Okay, so if you want to reduce costs, don't think about replacing people. Think about where those people's time is going and replacing those workflows with AI. So we want to basically list out all the team members that we have, including yourself, and where their time is going to, what workflows. And those are going to be the highest triage things to solve, right? The most time is going to those things. Because if you think about it as dollar per hour times the amount of hours worked, those are the highest value things to replace. That's what will save you the most money in terms of allocation of people's time. So for example, let's say sales reps on your team are very high paid, right? They're producing the revenue for your business. Maybe they're not even going to automate them completely, but let's just say you got sales reps to not do phone calls, there's not do call notes, not have to do dispositions, not have to be follow-up casts. Like 70% of their time is going towards, low-level tasks like taking notes and following up in terms of messaging. Like, can we automate that stuff? Now their time is spent in only one thing, picking up the phone and making dials. Like we're trying to increase the value per time of our team members, right? Reduce our costs and increase the value per time. But let's say you have a video editor, for example. And that video editor spends a large percentage of their time searching for footage. Like they're going through all the footage, they're trying to figure out what the best footage to piece is, or maybe they're doing mundane tasks like editing out mistakes, like just grunt work. A lot of times if you've edited videos, there's grunt work. We're just editing out the mistakes, chopping pieces out, where people go and on, all that stuff, and saying, all right, their time, their highest leverage things over here, but most of their time is going towards the grunt work. Maybe we could use AI to solve that. That would be a very high value thing because now he doesn't have to do any of that grunt work. The high value stuff he's doing, he can do 5 times more. So we're looking for where is that labor going and how can we replace those pieces. The pieces that take the most time are the most valuable to replace. And the second type of cost is like software costs for the most part. And a lot of times these ones are more effort to replace than it's worth it, even though this is one of the first things people go for, right? Because you should rarely replace software just as a result of cost, because when you do, you incur the new cost of maintenance, right? You have to actually keep up with it, make sure it's working. And a lot of times software is pretty cheap. It's one of the lowest priority things to replace, even though it's one of the first things business owners try to go attack. So software is one of the last things you want to attack. And the third thing is working on new stuff. So where can it bring value? Working on new stuff is the least valuable thing you can do, right? It's obviously, you can still have a tremendous upside, but it's the last thing you want to look at when it comes to actually blowing up your business. And the reason why is when you do new stuff, you add more surface area into the business, right? More stuff, new stuff means there is going to be more problems, period, end of story. So when we do more stuff and there's more problems, now we have our old problems and our new problems, and it's just a nightmare. Versus if we focus on solving the constraints first, then we have less problems, stuff's more seamless, and we're able to scale more by doing less, not by doing more, right? By reducing costs, then all we have to do is we're eliminating the costs that already exist. So the last thing you want to do is just new stuff. The first thing everyone does with AI is they see, oh, I'm going to build this new idea, I have this other thing, and they just have 7 different projects in their vibe coding, and vibe coding is addicted. But our goal is not to just do cool stuff. Our goal is to scale the business. If we want to scale the business, we need to do the highest triage things first, right? Working on new stuff is like working on a low triage person who's in the emergency room. We don't want to do it. Even if it's a novel case that someone walks in, it's this rare thing that the doctor's never heard of and he really wants to work on. That doesn't mean it's the highest triage thing to do. So the second piece is difficulty. So we know what's the highest value now. We know the 3 things that create value in business that we can deploy AI against. Now we have to understand what the difficulty of those things are, because something is super valuable but nearly impossible to do. It's probably not high triage, right? Because it's going to take a lot of effort, or it might not even be possible at all. So what is the difficulty? It's the number of components in a workflow times how much variation there is, plus the risk of failure, right? Meaning the number of components, some tasks are incredibly complex. There's 50 different little sub-steps and things to think through that task. Versus other things all right, well, it's pretty simple. We post videos to social media. That's a pretty easy thing to do. We already have the content. The workflow we're trying to replace is posting videos. So, all right, we need an API to post the videos. That's it. And then how much variation is basically, some tasks is very cookie cutter. I think if there's McDonald's where every single time you order a Big Mac, it's the exact same process. Nothing changes. And then imagine a private chef who works for a billionaire. Every single day, something new is happening. It's completely dependent on the day. One day it's super complex, another it's not. And so that's high variance. So if something's high variance, it's hard to replace with AI because you have to account for the variance. Versus if something is just like cookie cutter, once it works, you know it works and it's not going to break, that is much easier to replace AI with where it currently stands. And then the risk of failure is, all right, can AI do this to a place where the failure is not that big of a deal? Like maybe, let's say auditing your taxes or you're doing your taxes. Like even though AI can probably do it, but you probably want a human involved because the cost of messing that up is very high, right? And so you want to account for the risk of failure. Like, is there a tolerance for failure in this task? And if there's no tolerance for failure, then it's a lot more risky to have AI do it. But if there's a high tolerance for failure, then it makes a lot of sense to have AI do it. So how do you actually replace workflows with AI once we identify the highest triage ones? Right? You look in the business, you say, all right, I know the three places they can add value. I understand what the difficulty level of each of them is. How do you actually go about replacing the workflows now that we have a good idea of what the triage is? So first question is, what AI do we use? And as it currently stands, what I use, what I've recommended everyone I know to use, what I have team members use is Claude Code, right? Claude Code is by far the best thing that exists right now. And not just Claude Code specifically. Like anything a human can do on a computer, Claude Code can do. So it can open browsers, it can write code for you that does just about anything. Like what you have to understand is almost anything that happens on a computer is code. Like if you want to edit a video, that is code. If you want to, basically literally anything you think of is literally just code. And so Claude Code is the best thing. So literally, as soon as this video ends, download Claude Code, start using it on your computer, and start understanding the capabilities. The best way to get good at it is not sitting here watching me telling you this is the secret prompting strategy, which we'll get into some of that stuff here in a second. But it's literally just understanding the capabilities by having it try and move stuff. And you'll literally start to understand exactly how to use it, what it's capable of, what it's not capable of. But download Claude Code, it is the best. I promise you it'll change your life. And then the next thing to understand is it's never black and white. Like, can AI do this? That's what most people ask. Can AI do this workflow? And it's not black and white. It's much more of a spectrum, right? How much can it do? And how well can it do it? And how difficult it is to achieve that task? So you understand it's not black and white. It is a spectrum. And what most people do wrong is this. They get AI a monumental task, and they just get super upset with it when it fails. So this is like getting a construction worker. They're like, hey, can you go build the Burj Khalifa for me? Build this massive skyscraper? It doesn't matter how talented that person is, they are going to fail. And the reason why is that is too big of a problem, right? You got to think about AI like individual human labor. That problem is way too big. You got to think about building foundation and build electrical and this and that. There's just too much going on. Like it is way too much going on for one person to do. So the first step of getting AI to replace a workflow is breaking it up into components using first principles thinking, right? So you're not saying, hey, do my marketing for you. It's like, dude, that is unbelievably broad and complex. You want to break it up into first principles, just what are all the subcomponents? So video editing, right? If you say, hey, can you edit my videos? That is too big of a task for AI. There is too much going on. It is going to forget stuff. It's going to mess stuff up. It doesn't have focus. It's trying to do too many things. Like imagine a human, you just threw a bunch of balls at them at once. You said, catch. They're not going to catch it, would they? They're just not. It's because there's too much going on. So we want to throw one ball at AI to only has to catch one thing. So video editing, if we're breaking it up into all the subcomponents, you have cutting out the mess ups. So like when people mess up on camera, they or ah or whatever. Then you have switching between camera angles. So it's like, all right, if I have an A cam and a B cam, I have to decide when I'm going to switch those angles in the middle of the video. And then maybe we want to do zoom ins and zoom outs. Like sometimes when I say something emphasis, it zooms up in my face. Other times it zooms out. And then there's adding background music. And then there's color grading. And then there's B-roll. And depending on how complex you want to get with the video editing, you can get a lot more complex than this. But you have to break it up into all the subtasks. So whatever workflow you're trying to replace, literally you got to sit there and think from first principles. And you can brainstorm with AI to how to help you do this. But what are all the individual sub pieces? Okay? You got to break it down. And then step 2 is evaluating the difficulty of doing this task now, right? What are all the subtasks? How difficult are each ones? So if we look at video editing, we have all these different pieces. Like how difficult is cutting out the mess ups? Well, cutting out the mess ups isn't that hard because we can look at the transcript and AI can analyze the transcript and the timestamps. And based off of that, it could cut out the pieces that don't make sense. And switching between camera angles, right? It's great. Well, AI, we can figure out when to do it. So what's the heuristic, meaning the shortcut, the way of the mental model for when we switch camera angles. So, all right, we're going to switch every 3 to 5 seconds randomly, or we're going to switch every time, point change. You just have to figure out what is the way that we're actually going about it. And start thinking through how difficult is each one of these things, right? Is it capable of doing this thing? And basically what you want to do is you want to basically prompt AI and just, hey, I'm trying to do XYZ, explain the macro task. So I'm trying to edit videos. Here are all the subparts we need to accomplish in order for it to be successful. Help me think through the difficulty of each part. What parts will be easy and what parts will be hard? So basically we just give it the list that we broke down. Like, hey, I want it to do this, 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 this. What parts are going to be difficult? Which parts could be easy based off of your capabilities? And it will literally tell you, hey, this is easy, this is easy, this is easy, this is easy. This is extremely hard. This is going to be done very poorly. And you're able to sit there and literally brainstorm with AI. And it will tell you. It's like, imagine you sit down with a construction worker and you're like, hey, I want you to build this building. What parts are going to be easy and what parts are kind of out of your wheelhouse? And the guy will go, hey, I'm really good at this piece, and this piece, but I'm not so good at this piece. And AI will literally tell you the exact same thing. And now we have a very good grasp on the difficulty of replacing whatever workflow we're trying to replace. And then we ask this simple question. Elon has this mental model for how he thinks about running his companies. Basically, it's make your requirements less done, delete a part of the process, optimize, accelerate, and automate. So we want to take the same approach. Like, hey, this is what it says is difficult. Can we make the requirements less dumb, right? Are there pieces we don't actually need to do? Or can we eliminate stuff? Or are there parts that are too difficult for the AI to do that we can just have a human in the loop? Because the goal is not to replace an entire human, it's to replace the time they're spending on activities. So if we can reduce that time by getting rid of all the easy pieces, and then the parts that humans are really good at, AI is not quite there yet, we leave those in for human in the loop. So let's say, maybe in the video editing, for example, we're able to do all those things, but AI is not very good at picking the music. All right, can we have a human in the loop just to pick the music and add it in at the end? It's like, all right, that's probably a pretty easy thing to do. So we really want to identify where are those pieces, how can we eliminate stuff, how can we have human in the loop for the parts that are going to be difficult? Because the goal isn't to replace everything, is to find the low-hanging fruit, the stuff that's going to add the most value to the business, and not just like, all right, we need to replace every single piece. So how much do we estimate it can do? All right, that's the first question. After we've done this brainstorming session, how difficult is it going to be to do those things that it can do? And is it still highest triage? Those are the questions we're going to ask before we actually go about starting to solve it. So we have our triage list of all the stuff that we think can add value to the business, and then we go through this process to kind of almost scope it out a little bit of like, hey, we think this is the highest triage thing. Let's kind of dive into it and understand the problem better before we actually commit to building out a solution for it. And after we do this kind of brainstorming session with Claude Code, then we'll say, hey, we still think we want to move forward with doing it. And if the answer is yes, then here's what we're going to do. We're going to go one chat for one problem. Right? So one new conversation with Claude Code for every single sub-step that we broke down. And the reason why we do this is this. Context engineering is how you squeeze the most out of AI's capabilities, okay? Now, AI has two types of memory. It has this long-term memory and it has this working memory. So like all the stuff that it was trained on, the entire internet, that's like what its base model it has. It just knows all this stuff. But then it has its working memory. This is like its cognitive load. The more stuff that is in the chat, the less smart it's gonna be. Think of it that way. Like imagine as a human being, you're trying to do math in your head and someone gives you one math equation and tells you to solve it. Like 2 + 2 equals, like what does it equal? And all right, it equals 4. It's not too difficult. But now I just give you a bigger equation and a bigger equation. And now I give you 2 equations. And now I give you 2 equations and, a riddle that you have to solve. The more stuff that's in your head, the harder it is to solve. And it's the same thing with AI. So we want to do one conversation for every single sub-problem. That way we're having less working memory for it to solve. So it's just super focused on what actually is in front of it. And the more you're able to chunk down problems to very small problems, the easier it is for AI to solve. The same way for a human. Like a human has a much easier job, a much easier time, the smaller you make a problem. So the smaller problem is, the easier it is. The same way the construction worker isn't just going to go build this giant skyscraper. If you say, hey, I need you to install the light switches, it's a much easier task. And so we're trying to do the exact same thing with AI. We're trying to get all the context it needs for installing the light switches and only give it that one task until it is completed. And then we'll do a new chat, a new conversation for the next sub-problem. That's how it needs to work. And the better understand the problem, the easier time it's going to have. As Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and understanding the problem before I spend the last 5 minutes trying to come up with solutions. And this is really how we want to approach solving problems with AI. What most people do is they say, hey, Claude Code, do all my marketing for me. And then Claude Code just like starts doing stuff. Right? It doesn't understand the problem. It doesn't understand what you want. It doesn't understand what it's trying to solve. And the scope is way too big. What we want to do instead is this. We want to say, I want to, wherever the substep is, make it to where we can cut between the A cam and the B cam in our video. I want you to think through from first principles and deeply understand this problem, research all the potential solutions of how you could do it, and then evaluate the pros and cons of each. And so before you have AI do anything, the first thing you want to do is have it try to understand the problem and think through all the potential solutions to where it doesn't just pick the first thing. Because what you'll find with where AI is right now, it will literally just like, if you just tell it to do stuff, it just picks the first solution and does it. And it may not be the best solution. So you have to treat AI like you treat a human being, right? The way you treat human labor. If I wanted a human to do something, I want them to spend a lot of time thinking about the problem first before they actually go about actually taking action. So sit down and say, hey, this is the first problem. Think through it. And once it's thought through fully, then it can begin solving the problem. Writing code, do whatever it needs to do to solve that first piece. And then once it solves that first piece and you get to a place where you're happy with the outcome of that first substep, then we move on to the second substep. And what do we need to do for the second substep? We create a new chat, right? A new conversation. And then we say, hey, here is the new problem. We're trying to do X, Y, and Z. Think through this substep. I want you to research it deeply, understand it deeply from first principles. And then once they do that, then we can evaluate the solutions and actually go back to it. And a lot of times when I show people Claude Code, I'm like, hey, use this, this will change your business, this will change everything. They get super overwhelmed because like, I don't know what to do or how to do it. But you have to understand, it is literally like having a super genius sitting next to you for every single thing. And anytime you don't know anything, you're like, hey, I don't know where to go from here. Hey, I don't know what the next substep is. I don't know what the next problem is. I don't know, what we need to do. Just ask it, right? Literally, whatever question you would ask to someone sitting next to you, if they were helping you with it, literally you could ask to Claude and it will literally tell you exactly whatever you need to know next, right? If it's stuck and you're like, I don't know why we're struggling here, explain it as if you were explaining it to a human and say, hey, why are we stuck? What is the first principles problem, right? And then from there, you just keep moving forward. And then step 4 is continuously reevaluate. All right, so as you're going through this process where you have a workflow, you chunked it into all the substeps, and you're solving each individual substep with one conversation per substep, what we need to do is we need to ask ourselves this, right? You never truly understand the difficulty of a problem until you get into the weeds of it. All right, so we need to make sure we're not operating from sunk cost bias. Our only goal is not to build cool stuff with AI, it's to scale the business, right? We're using AI as a tool to help us do that. So sometimes you get into a problem and you realize, man, I thought this was going to be easy, but this is extremely difficult. Or there are limitations that I did not realize were there. And as a result of that, a lot of times people will start working on something, get stuck, and rather than going, this probably isn't worth working on because it's too difficult to do in terms of the amount of time I'm going to spend is not worth the value I'm going to get out of replacing this thing with AI. There's another solution for another problem that is higher triage. So rather than just abandoning it and working on the next thing, people get sunk cost bias. So they start working on like, I've already put a lot of hours into this. I got to get this across the finish line. But you have to operate from a blank slate at all times. Hey, is it my highest triage to keep working on this thing? And sometimes you start working on something, you're trying to replace something with AI, and you realize it's going to be extremely difficult. And the right decision is to say, screw it, we're not going to work on this. Or this substep, we're going to have a human do this for now, and I'm going to work on the next piece. Or it might even be this whole workflow is way more complex than I realized. AI is just not at a place where it can do that yet. We'll revisit this in 6 months as the technology gets better. For now, the next highest triage task is this one. And you just really need to constantly be reevaluating what highest triage is. Otherwise, you'll get stuck on this sunk cost bias where, like, I already messed the time into this. I already messed the money into this. I'm going to keep working on it, and you just get stuck in perpetual loop. So the question isn't, how can I use AI in my business, right? The question is simply, how do I use AI, or how do I scale my business? And then is AI the best way to do that? See, most people get stuck in what Mark Twain calls man with the hammer syndrome, right? Where the man with the hammer thinks everything's a nail. And the person who starts vibe coding, they get Claude Code, they're just like, oh, what are all this stuff I can do? And they're trying to apply AI to all these problems. But the real way to look at it is understand what's going to scale the business, right? And the way you scale a business is very simple. It's based off theory of constraints. What is the constraint of the business? Identify what that constraint is. We hypothesize solutions, knowing that we have AI at our disposal. And if AI is the best solution, then we put that puzzle piece in where it belongs. We're not just like trying to just attach AI to everything. We're trying to put the puzzle piece in where it belongs. The ultimate goal is to scale the business, nothing else. We're not trying to do anything other than scale the business. And so you gotta say, what is my objective in the business right now, right? Have we achieved the objective, yes or no? And the answer is probably no if you're watching this right now. You're trying to hit whatever revenue you're trying to hit. And so you identify the constraint, you hypothesize the solution, you test the solution, and you keep iterating that process until you solve that constraint, and then you go to the next biggest constraint. So the biggest thing with AI you have to understand is it is a tool. Right? It is one of the most powerful tools to replace labor. But if you do not have a valuable place to put labor in your business, you do not have a valuable way to deploy labor, you're not going to be able to use AI in an effective way that's going to just 10x your business overnight. So the first thing to understand is really triaging. Where does labor need to be deployed where it's going to add the most value? Now, can I break that, where that labor is going to do, the workflow that labor is going to do, into sub-steps that AI can replace?